record. Okay, thank you. We have SeedSigner here. Thank you for coming, joining the Philadelphia Bitcoin Club. I appreciate you taking your time out today. You allowed us, I thank you for allowing us to have some of your time. I know you're a busy man with family and all, so just want to take it off and kind of introduce yourself and kind of talk about the product for us.
Yeah, for sure. And I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you guys because as you kind of alluded, like I'm a stay-at-home dad and I don't get to travel as much as I'd want to. So as many meetups as I would love to get to, like this is a very cool opportunity to talk directly to people and share kind of some information about SeedSigner and what we're doing. So full disclosure, this is a slide deck that I used in El Salvador a couple of weeks ago. Like 97% of it is going to be totally pertinent to what we're talking about, but you will notice a couple of slides explicitly about El Salvador, but I think those are relative too. So a little bit about me. I was a police officer for 15 years, and for 12 of those years, I worked as a digital forensics examiner. It was kind of a unique career path in law enforcement, and what turned out to be a tremendous opportunity to get access to the training and kind of career experiences that I had access to. So was in a computer lab, 5 days a week, taking apart computers and phones and trying to see if I could extract data to support or refute prosecutions. For the majority of my career, while I was working in law enforcement, I also obtained a master's in organizational security management, which is kind of like a dual element degree where it's not just like physical security sort of considerations, but it's also grown into the information security field and awareness about how organizations can secure, any kind of information that's valuable to them. I first came to Bitcoin in 2013, but I'll talk a little bit more about this. Excuse me, but I think of my Bitcoin life as, a play in two acts. And I'll talk more about it in a sec, but I'm a 3D printing geek. That was part of how I started getting involved with some of the other projects in the Bitcoin space. There's just something really cool to me about being able to imagine something that is just a virtual object in your mind and to be able to map it out and be able to create it in 3 dimensions. I'm a Christian, not here to virtue signal about that, but I'd like to think it's kind of built into the ethos of our project rather, that one of the most elevated human activities is just trying to help other people and make things better for other human beings. So I hope that is built into the ethos of our project. And then I created this SeedSigner thing right up on about 2 years ago, as I'd been out of my law enforcement career for a year or two. And so SeedSigner is kind of the product of my background, which is kind of unique as a digital forensics examiner, as well as my law enforcement background and just some different aspects of me personally. So I first heard about Bitcoin in 2012 or 2013 at work. And it was the result of another examiner in the forensic lab was working an investigation where a local kid he was kind of a rich kid, and he had gotten a nice dual GPU gaming rig that you could use to play Call of Duty or, other FPS kind of games. But he had figured out, and this is 2012, 2013, so Bitcoin mining via GPUs was still totally viable. So he was mining Bitcoin with his gaming computer and then purchasing weed on the Silk Road with the Bitcoins that he mined. And then the weed was shipped to his house. He would break it into smaller packages, take it to school, and he was making like a nice little hustle with the money he was making from selling the marijuana. And that, of course, got the attention of the school faculty, and they brought the police in for an investigation. And his computer and some of the other technology items from his home ended up in our lab. And so this other examiner who was working this case, kind of just in water cooler talk, came up to me. He's like, I'm working this investigation that involves this thing called Bitcoin. Have you heard of it? And that was the first time I'd ever heard of Bitcoin in my life. And so I started Googling because it seemed just, I was curious about like these GPUs and like, what would all this compute be being used for? And I didn't know if it was some sort of like huge decentralized like password cracking engine, or some sort of like SETI, search for extraterrestrial intelligence at home, or what the thing was. And so I started down the rabbit hole, and like I often tell people, like Bitcoin kind of hits you where you are in your life. And I was a young dad at that point, and we had just bought a new house, and I was trying to make mortgage payments and trying to make all the numbers work for daycare. And so I was kind of looking for an investment in my life at that point. So that was the lens through which I viewed Bitcoin, was as a potential investment. And so as I started to learn more about it, I started to, run the numbers in terms of what could this thing be worth, and what was it worth at that point, and blah, blah, blah. So I bought Bitcoin, and I continued to learn about it by, reading Reddit. Bitcoin Twitter wasn't really a thing back then. I was active on the Bitcoin Talk forums, and kind of did some mining at home and that kind of stuff, and kind of kept it in the back of my mind while I was still in my career in law enforcement. Fast forward till about 2017, and we had gone through a long bear market from like 2014 through 2016. It was a hard time to be a Bitcoiner, because the price was just doing this gradual decline. And I'd always in the back of my mind, kind of, it wasn't even a serious thought, but I always thought, like, if Bitcoin ever gets to the point that I could pay off my house and have like a debt-free life, like, I would consider that. So in early 2017, as Bitcoin was getting a little bit over $2,000, it became such that we could, like, if I sold all of the Bitcoin that I own, we could pay the taxes on the gain and actually pay off our mortgage and have like a completely debt-free sort of fresh start in life. And at this time, there was a lot of the fork war stuff going on with the block size wars and Bitcoin Cash breaking off and that stuff. And like, I admittedly had weak hands, and I thought, if I lose the ability to pay off my house because some developers are arguing about parameters in software, I probably won't forgive myself. So very awkwardly and clumsily sold everything. And for the rest of 2017, I did not want to hear about Bitcoin or think about Bitcoin, because the price just kept going up and up and up. And I would just think about how much more money I could have made if I'd sold everything later in the year. But then, of course, the price peaked. It started to come back down. And in 2018, as the price was kind of like, what would we call it? Mean reversing, I guess you'd say. I started kind of following the same accounts on Twitter, listening to the same podcasts, and like Bitcoin still had its hooks in me. So I started reaccumulating Bitcoin. And because we no longer had a mortgage, I started planning for a career after law enforcement. So I think it was 2019, I was able to step away and start like a second new career as a stay-at-home dad. And I kind of tell you about all this stuff because all of, my experiences, not just as a forensic examiner, but just like with weak hands and having kind of when I set up my early Bitcoin storage, it was, I think it was good by the standards at the time, but it always left me feeling insecure. And I think that insecurity about, is this value that I'm trying to protect really there? Do I really have access to it? And is it really safe? I think all of that goes into how people, how secure they are when they're holding for the long term as Bitcoiners, because if they get freaked out, they're likely to send their coins to an exchange, and then you're just one step away from the sell button. So after I stepped away from law enforcement, I started reaccumulating Bitcoin, and I started thinking about, like, as I'm buying more Bitcoin, what is the ideal kind of like storage setup for me? And I started to bounce some of the concepts that I learned about during my time in digital forensics. And then I stumbled across another DIY project called the Spectre DIY that resonated for me in a lot of ways in terms of it used this very elegant way of communicating between your laptop and your computer, which was animated QR codes. And that felt like such an advance over plugging a device into your USB port, because as a forensic examiner, when you plug a USB device in your computer, like, all sorts of things automatically happen you don't even know about. They're kind of going on under the hood in terms of drivers being loaded, and storage space being accessed and volumes being auto mounted and potentially code being accessed and such. So hardware wallets that plugged into a USB port always made me uncomfortable. And it's such that, in digital forensics, because we don't want to modify evidence that we're working on, we actually have a dedicated hardware device that's called a write blocker that you attach to your forensic computer. And whenever you want to extract information from a piece of evidence, you don't plug it directly into your forensic machine. You plug it into this device called a write blocker, which is specially designed not to allow any new writes to happen to the evidence. So you can't be accused of manipulating evidence or improperly gathering evidence or inadvertently making changes to evidence. But this USB connection, like there's a lot that can happen there. So it always made me uncomfortable to plug a USB hardware wallet into a computer. So this air-gapped animated QR exchange is a very elegant solution. And the first time I signed a transaction that way, it was almost like the first time I sent a Bitcoin transaction or the first time I used Lightning. It was that same kind of light bulb, like this is really something. And then another kind of element from my digital forensic experience that we incorporated into SeedSigner is this idea of statelessness. And in the digital forensic world, sometimes, for example, when you have a laptop that you want to conduct an acquisition from, so you want to read all of the information off of the hard drive that's internal to the laptop. Sometimes the laptop may be difficult to take apart, or there may be some sort of encryption in play. Whatever the reason is, sometimes you have to actually use the computer to acquire the data on the internal hard drive. And I won't belabor this too much, but they have what are called forensic live CDs. And of course, a live CD is nothing new to people who are familiar with Linux. It's like you have live CDs that are Linux operating systems that you can boot up and just use on your computer without necessarily installing, the full operating system. And a forensic live CD is mostly the same thing, just with some special tools built in to acquire data and run certain hashes when you're acquiring data. But the idea is that when you power the laptop that's subject to the investigation on, and maybe you're booting it to a live CD, so it's an optical disc, a CD or a DVD that you have inside of the computer, and you boot the computer in such a way that it bypasses the internal hard drive, and you just boot to this CD or DVD that is running exclusively in memory. You do what you need to do, and then when you power it off and you remove that CD or DVD, because all of the operating system was running in memory, there is literally no trace of you ever having used that machine, because data in computer memory, or RAM as a lot of people refer to it, is volatile. And what that means is that when you remove power from that system, the data that's stored in there is volatile, meaning it just dissipates, it goes away. So we borrow that concept for SeedSigner in such that when you are loading a key or creating a private key with SeedSigner, we take special care to make sure that that key information is only held as a temporary variable. It's a Python variable in memory. It's not cached to the memory card or stored anywhere else internally on the device. And when you pull the power from the SeedSigner, same thing with volatile memory on a laptop or a desktop computer. In the volatile memory that's on that Raspberry Pi that's inside of the SeedSigner, you pull the plug, it loses power, the memory loses its state, and the keys just go away. So to circle back, as I was kind of like playing with Spectre DIY, this idea of multi-sig was one more thing that resonated with me, because I've helped execute a lot of search warrants as a part of my career. It wasn't my primary role, but a lot of times they bring a technical expert on in case there's some sort of like questions, if they find a computer on, or if they find a program that's open that looks relevant to the investigation. So I helped execute a lot of search warrants. And this idea of being able to store Bitcoin, but to split up the necessary keys to access that Bitcoin into multiple physical locations, like for a law enforcement officer, or for some sort of government wanting to seize those funds, that's a nightmare. That's an absolute utter nightmare. Because like if I have a search warrant to find, a phone and a laptop computer, it's likely going to be in somebody's house or on their person. So you wait till they're at home. and you execute the search warrant, and they're probably holding the phone and their laptop is, in their home. But with these private keys, like when you can split them into multiple destinations, like that is extremely powerful in terms of resistance to seizure by, some sort of government entity or just some sort of adversary that might be trying to steal your money. So this idea of statelessness and having full air gapping and multi-sig wallets all kind of came together in my mind, and that's all that stuff is kind of baked into SeedSigner. So I've had this slide up for a little while, but it describes some of what I've been talking about. Very early on, we decided that everything to do with SeedSigner was going to be open source. Everything from obviously the software to the enclosures that we use to put them together, and we have a new purpose-built Linux OS that is kind of a replacement for the Raspberry Pi OS that we've historically, all of it is open source, and there's tremendous power in that in terms of leveraging, people's talents out there and improving on, what individuals can do or compensated individuals can do. So what does SeedSigner do? This all boils down to three things. And those are the three things that you need to do to create and use cold storage. First is we allow users to use physical entropy from the world around them to create secure private keys. So you can either roll dice to create the private key. You can do a BIP39 lottery where you have, the 2048 possible seed words, and you pick the first either 11 or 23 out of a hat, and then you have to use some sort of device to calculate the last word, which acts as a checksum against the words that precede it. So there's dice, there's BIP39 lottery, or Keith Mackay, who's one of our contributors, came up with this very clever mechanism to use the camera to take a photo. And we primarily use the entropy from the photo, but also entropy from a few other sources to create pretty good private keys in a very quick and painless way. So first is to create private keys. Second is to generate the public version of those keys that you need to be able to set up a wallet. And the whole idea here is that the SeedSigner is naturally this very isolated computing environment. It's built with hardware that doesn't have Wi-Fi, it doesn't have Bluetooth. So there's like, it's instead of being a don't be evil thing, it's like a can't be evil thing, because the device literally does not have the hardware on board to be able to connect to a Wi-Fi network or to do an NFC data exchange or to be able to make a Bluetooth connection. So the only way that that thing can communicate with the outside world is through the screen and the camera. But where was I going with that? So your private key lives on this SeedSigner that, like I said, is this very naturally isolated computing environment, but you have to be able to interact with the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, to be able to create a wallet, accept Bitcoin, makes spend. So you have a separate device that's either a laptop, computer, a desktop computer, or a phone. And that is where you need to use the public keys to set up a wallet to be able to interface with the rest of the Bitcoin network. So one, create private keys. Two, create the public keys. You need to be able to set up a wallet. And then three, what good is having that wallet if you're not able to spend funds from it eventually? So you can, lastly, sign transactions with the SeedSigner as well. And it's something, I haven't dwelled on this too much yet, but you can build it yourself from, we call them off-the-shelf, computer components. You're probably not going to find them in a local, computer shop, but they are relatively easy to find on the internet. So this was the slide from the presentation in El Salvador, but I think it's still totally relevant, because that operation in isolation where we use the animated QR codes means that SeedSigner works with mobile phones. So it's not just accessible to people in what we might call the first world with laptops and desktops, but in other parts of the world where people's primary way of accessing the internet is the phone in their pocket, SeedSigner works really well, and maybe even a little bit better with mobile phones than it does with laptops, because a lot of laptops tend to have lower quality webcams, whereas the quality of the camera in your phone is typically like a much higher grade, and that makes the QR exchange process much easier. So statelessness, again, means that this device doesn't remember your private keys. So that unlocks kind of the traditional hardware wallet model is one device per one private key. And SeedSigner breaks that correlation such that you can use the same device to create and manage, an infinite number virtually of private keys, as many as you would like to. So what that opens up is not just managing one Bitcoin wallet, but multiple single sig Bitcoin wallets, or having access to now start to explore multi-sig wallets. And, if you have close friends and family or close friends that you're trying to onboard into Bitcoin and set them up with some sort of a watch only cold storage account to where they can hold their Bitcoin in a more secure way, you can help, people close to you in your life set up a watch only wallet, and you can help them make spends when they want to make spends, or they can get their own SeedSigner, or they can eventually, the beauty of these interchangeable protocols is the same seed that's on your SeedSigner works if you plug it into a Trezor, or if you plug it into a Ledger or a Cold Card. All of these standards are interoperable. So if you start with a SeedSigner and decide for whatever reason you'd rather use a Foundation Passport, the seed and the wallet you set up is fully portable that way. And lastly, because of the do-it-yourself element to it, it's a very low build cost. When I first started this project, I could walk into a micro center, which I think you guys probably have one of those in Philadelphia, but I was able to walk into the micro center. I'm based out of St. Louis, and with $5 cash in hand, walk out with a Raspberry Pi Zero version 1.3, which is the exact version of the Raspberry Pi that we recommend building a SeedSigner with. And then the wave share hat that goes into it is, probably about $15, and you throw in a $10 camera, and for about $40, you have a very capable Bitcoin storage device for relatively little money. But that do-it-yourself element, a lot of people who are either very private or people who are very conscious of their operational security also appreciate the do-it-yourself element of SeedSigner, because if you order a hardware wallet through the mail, the hardware wallet companies obviously take steps to make sure that in the supply chain before they get the components, and the kind of distribution chain that exists after they've manufactured the device, they try to take special care to make sure that devices, can't be tampered with either prior to manufacture or after manufacture. But the truth is, like, you can look it up on YouTube, like the CIA has literal repackaging stations where they can, break foil seals and repackage things in such a way that it's virtually undetectable. So ordering a high value Bitcoin security device through the mail for some people is kind of like a deal breaker because of the things that could happen to it along the way. So with SeedSigner, because none of the parts that are used to build it are identified specifically as related to Bitcoin, it makes the prospect of a supply chain attack a lot more difficult, because there are thousands of people out there using Raspberry Pi Zeros and other Raspberry Pis for all sorts of other projects that are not Bitcoin related. So where do you kind of insert the attack? It adds a certain mitigation to the supply chain attack by using these kind of generic non-Bitcoin related computer parts. That said, also in places like, I'll throw out Iran, in addition to the security reasons, you may not want to order like a Bitcoin hardware wallet through the mail there, because that could potentially identify you as a person who is interested in and or using Bitcoin. When I've talked to people in the Middle East, they'll tell me that hardware wallets are available in some cases, but typically you'd have to buy them on the black market. And that doesn't sound like a great kind of like purchase experience to be able to buy this security critical device like from a black market source, not knowing if it could have been tampered with or what kind of stops it's made along the way to your hand. So SeedSigner, for people who are operating in adversarial environments, also kind of lets them build a very secure Bitcoin savings device kind of under the radar, so that potentially people don't realize that they're interfacing with the Bitcoin network. So right now, SeedSigner officially supports 4 coordinators. There's probably 1 or 2 more that are going to happen within the next month or so. But on laptop and desktop, there is Spectre Wallet and Sparrow Wallet. Both are great options. Spectre at this point requires you to have your own node that you can access. And Sparrow will, of course, support you if you have your own node, but it also allows you to connect to an Electrum server. So if there's some Uncle Jim that you work with who allows you to connect to his or her node, or if there's a public Electrum server that you feel like you can trust, that's an option with Sparrow as well. On mobile, there's Blue Wallet, which same story. It allows you to connect to your node and or public Electrum server, which I think Nunchuck does too. Nunchuck is a little bit newer software. It's a little more green. Not say it isn't reliable, but it's some of the usability, there's room for improvement there. So I at least for now, steer people more towards Blue Wallet. But what Nunchuck doesn't have that Blue Wallet has is testnet. I'm not sure if it's something that people in your meetup are aware of, but there is this whole parallel Bitcoin network that's called Bitcoin Testnet, where their testnet has its own nodes, its own miners. It's a special version. It's actually not a special version of software. You just have to switch testnet on in settings, but it allows you to basically practice everything that you can do with Bitcoin without risking any actual money. So there are faucets, and when people are new to SeedSigner or new to multi-sig or new to all of it, I always recommend testnet as like their first stop, because it lets you simulate like everything you can do with Bitcoin without risking any funds whatsoever. You guys have probably heard of Bitcoin Beach Wallet. We're hoping to integrate with them as well to give all of the people in El Salvador and Mexico and Guatemala and parts of Africa, for many of them, their first experience with Bitcoin is through a custodial account that is Lightning enabled. And so what we would like to do is be able to build into Bitcoin Beach Wallet a way for people who are first introduced to Bitcoin as a custodial tool to have kind of a separate Bitcoin savings account, or a vault as we're calling it, to be able to save Bitcoin on chain, of course, but in such a way that if their Galoy operator goes away, or if their community banking operator goes away, or there's some sort of technical glitch, like they don't have to worry about their funds being stolen. And so they'd be able to recover their money with other software outside of the Bitcoin Beach Wallet. But so it's kind of the comparison is probably between like a checking account and a savings account, only the savings account is something that the bank can't steal from you because you're holding the private keys for it. I kind of glossed over this before. So the basic hardware ingredients that go into a SeedSigner are, on the left, the green board is a Raspberry Pi Zero version 1.3. And most people are probably familiar with the larger Raspberry Pis that a lot of folks use to build nodes with. This is still like a single board computer that's self-contained, basically like mini PC, but it's a little smaller form factor than the flagship Raspberry Pis. And just next to it with the buttons and the screen is a LCD display and control set that fits on top of the Raspberry Pi. That's basically commodity hardware. It's made by a company called Waveshare, but they're ubiquitously available from retailers, here in America, AliExpress, Alibaba, like all over the world. And then in the lower left, there's just a simple Raspberry Pi camera with a Raspberry Pi Zero ribbon cable attached to it. That's the orange cable coming out. A memory card where you're going to write the software that you use to operate SeedSigner, and then a USB cable. And in the very lower right there is just a simple 3D printed enclosure that kind of holds everything together and protects it from in case it's dropped or something like that. But as I said before, the Raspberry Pi Zeros and Raspberry Pis in general, unfortunately, have gotten a lot more expensive over the last, year and a half with the COVID supply chain issues. I'm starting to see the supply recover, but it's going to take time. So like I said, $5 when I first started this. Probably on eBay, you're going to pay $30 or $40 for either a brand new in the package or a used Raspberry Pi version 1.3. So that puts your build cost up closer to 60. But I think for being what it is, I think there's still a ton of value there with SeedSigner. As I mentioned, it can be hard to find Raspberry Pi Zero. So we do have several contributors working on porting our software so that you can use it with other hardware platforms. And this particular design is for a microcontroller family called ESP32, which is a little bit different from the processors on a Raspberry Pi are more of like a general purpose processor, whereas these are microcontrollers such that you can run code more directly on the hardware with these. So it's a different kind of computing environment that is requiring like a rewrite of our software. But the hope is that the DIY aspect of our project is important to me, and it's never going to go away. Most importantly so because of what I talked about, people who live in adversarial environments, and SeedSigner being something that they can build in relative secrecy. But another thing I've learned over the course of kind of leading this project is that there are only so many people out there in the world who are going to build their own Bitcoin storage devices or jump into DIY projects. So if people see a SeedSigner and they think it's something that they'd be curious to try or use for storage, a lot of people out there would just like to see the thing and be able to buy it. So with this purpose-built circuit board, we can potentially manufacture these at a pretty low price point and retain the same core characteristics that make SeedSigner a solid choice for cold storage. So the statelessness and the air gapping, and frankly, our user interface is really awesome. For those of you who haven't seen it, like a lot of thought has gone into our user interface in terms of making it approachable to people who are less technical, while still kind of exposing them to technical concepts, but in a simpler way that maybe makes more sense than some other devices. So the long and short of this is we're trying to manufacture these so that we can sell them, because as we can get them into more people's hands at a lower price point, and it also provides an opportunity to reward some of our contributors who are really just developing the software on a volunteer basis. We do solicit donations as a project, but as anybody who's running, a volunteer software project knows, like donations just really don't come close to compensating the developers for the time and expertise that they put into the software. It's something that they do because they have a passion for it, and because it's a tool that they themselves like want to have and want to use in the world. So have to be very careful as we're exploring this retail option. My goal with all of this is to optimize what we're doing for impact rather than just as a money grab to cash in on what we've made with SeedSigner and the SeedSigner brand or whatever. I would like to see SeedSigner as kind of a broader resource within the Bitcoin ecosystem, such that the custom circuit boards that we're designing, the firmware that will run on those boards, the software that runs on top of the firmware, any 3D printed enclosure designs, all of it is going to be open source. And this isn't like the CoinKite source available BS. Like, this is like open source. If you think you can do it better, or if you don't like the way that we're doing it, or if we seem, somehow like we have a great idea, but we're not executing on it in the right way, take the idea, build them yourselves, make the changes you want to see. And so the best version of this can be there as, like I said, like a community resource for the Bitcoin ecosystem. I think if we can execute on this right, a lot of people will want to work with us as the creators of the software and the hardware. But like, if we end up being bad actors or other people can do it way better, like I welcome that, because that's just better tools for everyone. We're also not seeking venture money. It's just volunteer hardware guys and software guys who are working on this. So we're trying to keep that kind of like Bitcoin ethos of low time preference. And in the end, like, let the market be a weighing machine. We're not going to, there are no plans to sponsor podcasts or buy commercials or sponsor conferences. or any of that stuff. Like, we are just trying to make what we think is a super useful, honest, decent device and sell it at a fair price. And if people find value in that, they'll share it with other people. And, if we get feedback on how it can improve, then we'll improve it. But ultimately, not trying to drive this as like some sort of influencer play or anything like that. We want to make a decent quality thing and sell it to people at a fair price. So what we're working on right now, I mentioned we're trying to incorporate a cold storage module into the Bitcoin Beach wallet. I'm also trying to expand collaborations with Me Premier Bitcoin in El Salvador, the Human Rights Foundation, Built with Bitcoin, other NGOs that are operating in places where Bitcoin is frankly like very useful to people. So we are working on a custom version of that Wayfarer hat that I showed you before, that hopefully we can bring the cost down for that and start to say to, like, last month they had a series of workshops in El Salvador where people from Me Premier Bitcoin basically just an evening workshop where you get 15 people in a room, you give them all SeedSigners, you teach them how to use it, and then you say, like, go make cold storage happen. But the people that attend those workshops are provided a SeedSigner because it's a low-cost device just for coming in and attending the workshop. So I would like to try to expand that to make SeedSigners available to more people in those situations, because it's something that they can use with their relatives and their friends. A SeedSigner is kind of a force multiplier for cold storage, especially in parts of the world where, the cost of a hardware wallet can be a stretch for a lot of people. So I've already kind of talked about the microcontroller-based signer. And then, of course, we're still developing features. Our releases have slowed down a little bit with the push to get to ESP32, but we have released an experimental version of SeedSigner OS, which is a custom Linux operating system. That the neatest thing about that right now is it makes it such that when you power your SeedSigner up, after the user interface is up and running, you can remove the memory card. So this kind of addresses any lingering concerns that people might have that your key information might somehow be inadvertently making onto the memory card. So if you can remove the memory card after it starts up, enter your keys, there's no chance that they could be being preserved on that memory card. We're working on an address explorer such that you could create a Bitcoin wallet and start making deposits to it without even using a wallet coordinator. So you could start saving Bitcoin even without ever having exposed your public key to an internet connected computer, which for people who are super secretive, I've gotten feedback that that's kind of a desirable feature. So we'll see. And then with SeedSigner OS, being able to remove that memory card opens up some other interesting functions, like for really large multi-sig transactions, maybe we could use that memory card to move transaction information between the coordinator and the SeedSigner instead of using the air gap QRs. I'm still very much an air gap QR guy, and I will hold the SeedSigner for like 30 seconds in front of my computer because I believe in that air gapping. But understandably, some people have asked about PSBTs via micro SD, so it's something that we're looking into. We'll just have to be really careful about how we implement it. I've talked about some of this stuff. So if you're curious about SeedSigner, there's some resources. The marquee website is seedsigner.com. We have a number of explainer videos on there. There's some like talks I've done at conferences and on podcasts, but there's also something called our independent custody guide. And that's kind of my manifesto of why we made the design choices we have with SeedSigner and why I think our approach to cold storage is a valuable one. And so it kind of lays everything out in this one document. So I always recommend to people that's a really good place to get started if you're curious to learn more about it. If that all sounds good, consider maybe building one yourself, give it a try, or tell other people about it. Several meetups have had workshops where they will actually build them together and kind of like take their first kind of like SeedSigner practice steps together in a workshop environment. And then if you're interested to contribute to the project, you don't have to be a coder, you don't have to be a hardware guy. something as simple as making like a demo video of a feature, or walking through how to set up a wallet, or if you have fluency in another language and you'd be willing to translate, you know, a guide into another language. There's all sorts of opportunities for people to contribute that aren't just coding or like, you know, highly technical sorts of things to do. Just as a little bit of a kind of an aside about me. So I have a technical background, but I'm not a coder by any means. Digital forensics requires you to kind of have fluency in a lot of different areas of computer science, like, you know, file systems and how data is laid out on physical media and operating systems artifact and mobile device networks and just all sorts of these different things. And I had exposure to a little bit of coding, but I am not a deep coder. And so when I created kind of the initial versions of SeedSigner, I had to watch Udemy videos probably for 2 weeks to learn all of the basic programming, you know, loops and, you know, how to handle variables and all the kind of stuff that I need to know just to get this like limping proof of concept off the ground, until people that were a lot smarter and more talented at programming than me came in and said, like, you've got a great idea here, but your code's a mess and like, we can do this better, blah, blah, blah. So my role now with SeedSigner is kind of as a coordination point for different aspects of the project. I manage the Twitter account. I manage the marquee website. I still actually build all of the releases. So the private key that is used to sign all the releases is something that's held by me and me alone. So but my role is more trying to paint the bigger picture in terms of the direction of the project, and try to, when people are excited and they have skills that they'd like to contribute, I like to try to put the right people together to continue to develop the project and add features and such. I haven't even looked at the time. I've been talking for like almost 45 minutes. That's really all I have. I think that's the last, one more slide. I always throw out thank yous to everybody, because this is not just me. And especially the Human Rights Foundation, who has given us, our contributors, 2 grants now that have helped a lot to bring new features. We have kind of like 2 primary contributors. There's Keith Mackay, who's I would say our lead developer. And then there's Nick, who is, he was SeedSigner's first contributor besides me. And he does a ton of practical sort of tasks with coding and keeping branches of repo organized and helping respond to issues. And he also helps Keith a lot with just new feature implementations and thinking through workflows and stuff. Joe Mail is the hardware guy who's working on our custom PCB. And then all of the people below, like, this isn't just lip service. All those people have made significant contributions to the project as it's gone forward. Like Stefan Snigarev, right? He wrote this mbit library that does all of the protocol work that we use. And he fielded all of my super dumb noob questions when I was trying to build a proof of concept about how do you compose public keys and transactions and blah, blah, blah. And I won't go through all the names, but SeedSigner is truly like a grassroots kind of community built tool. And that's how we try to continue to grow it. So that's all I have. If you guys have any questions, I really appreciate you guys being interested enough to sit here and listen to me talk. And thank you.
Yeah, just ask away. Anybody, just come off the mic if anybody have any questions.
Maybe I covered everything.
Yeah, I got a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I actually already built a SeedSigner and I love it. But I'm
Very
kind
cool.
of wondering, with the shortage of Raspberry Pi Zeros, what would you recommend if I wanted to gift a Raspberry Pi to a family member? I mean, a SeedSigner, sorry.
It depends if you really want to buy it in such a way that it's like not known that it's going to be for a SeedSigner. I would buy. I've personally bought a lot of Raspberry Pis off of eBay, and there's no way that the person on the other side of the transaction could have known that I was, buying that for a Bitcoin sort of project. So if you are really concerned about supply chain attacks, that's the way I would do it. However, there are myself, shameless shill, as well as there are two guys in Europe who ship worldwide, who we all make SeedSigner kits that include all of the basic hardware that you need all in one package. When I send things out, they've already been tested. I've already soldered the headers onto the Raspberry Pi, so you can just snap everything together. So those are kind of the two basic options: is eBay and either get a W and disable the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, or you can still find 1.3s. I would note, and I haven't said a lot about this publicly, I've been bothering the Raspberry Pi for a long time to sell units to me directly, the Raspberry Pi Foundation, I should say. And finally, just within the last month, they have agreed to, I don't know if it's been an availability thing or what, but finally, they have allowed me to submit a purchase order, and they say that sometime in the month of December, they're going to ask for payment, and they're going to ship me a quantity of Raspberry Pis that I hope to get into other people's hands, through the workshops in El Salvador and such. But I think the fact that they are doing this is a signal that they are finally getting over their supply chain issues, and that we're going to start to, it's going to take a little bit to get through kind of the demand backlog that has materialized during the time of the shortages, but I think we're going to see availability really improving over the next 3 to 6 months. So, yeah.
Good news. Thanks.
And then also another feature with the SeedSigner, you can actually, like you mentioned previously, so if you have a niece, nephew, or brother, you can actually have it with the new update. I still use the original, one of the original versions. I still just personal preference, but you can actually hold and actually see, and you have it separated, so you can have it Joe, John, Mary, Dick, and you can actually have control, have control over those keys. Like I said, if you're planning on gifting for any nieces, nephew, kids, and things of that nature. So it's one of the beautiful things that I love about the project, that obviously it's DIY, something that you do. It's simple. I did it one night. I rarely drink. I did it drinking one night, and it was fairly simple. It was it's a fun project. And like I said, we're still trying to work on getting you out here to do a workshop in person. I had the opportunity meeting you down at Bitcoin Park down in September, and it was a great opportunity. But like I said, given the availability, what would you say ballpark as total for a kit? To say just right now in today's terms, just building it out.
I think $60. I think it's funny. Like I mentioned that I sell kits, and I originally priced them a year and a half ago at $80. And I priced them intentionally, like kind of awkwardly high, because I thought that would be an incentive for people to want to build their own. So it was only people who really just want to have one and they're not going to build it, who would be willing to pay $80. And I've never changed the prices. And as the kind of the supply issues have become more acute over time, like the build it yourself price and the price I sell at have gotten awkwardly close. So it's not as much of an incentive anymore. But back to your previous question, in terms of like for family members or nieces or nephews or whoever, for people who haven't set up a watch only wallet yet, it's entirely possible, and I've done this with my kids, to where you can, on their device, like download Blue Wallet, you create their private key with them there with you, so they can have the experience of like, we've created this private key out of nothingness, or we rolled dice or took a picture or selected words. So you create the private key, then you make an XPub from that. You can import the XPub onto their phone and create a watch only wallet. And then they don't need the SeedSigner to be able to A, see their balance, or B, make deposits to it. So they can have like that watch only wallet on their phone and just kind of like get the fuzzy feeling from seeing their Bitcoin. Or if you send them money for their birthday or Christmas, or, you know, for whatever, they mow your lawn or whatever. And if at some point they have a big purchase they want to make, because I kind of think with kids, it's more of a savings account. But if they have a big purchase they want to make, like if it's an infrequent sort of thing, they can come back to you and you can go through the spend process with them. So I love the idea of gifting seed centers to people, but you can even onboard people and set them up with cold storage, you know, with your device. And later on, you know, if they want their own, they can get their own, or if they just want their Uncle Jim to help them, then that's an option too.
Any other questions? Anybody come off the mic? Looks like
it
yes, it looks like everybody. It looks like, yeah, you wrapped it up. Looks like you must have knocked it out the park. Kind of explained everything. I mean, like I said, I definitely appreciate you taking the time. Like I said, it's a project that I love. I use. I go even with my girlfriend. You know, and then even you have these kits here. Nothing here. So you take a picture. But you often sell these on the website as well. So do you still sell the seed plates, the actual seed plates still?
Yes. I have we have 3 different sizes of seed QRs. I have 2 of the 3 in stock right now. So if you go to my Twitter profile, my pinned tweet is a link to my store. That's how people can find it if they're interested.
And now is that going to be workable with the seed hammer? Obviously, I'm sure, I don't know if you're familiar with the seed hammer, if you've seen that floating around on Twitter where they laser engrave. Is that going to be compatible as to work with the
those
QR?
will be, yeah, it's the same core concept, but they're going to end up being different different implementations of it. And I haven't seen a seed signer or a seed hammer firsthand yet, but I got to meet the creator in El Salvador a couple weeks ago, and I'm super excited about it too. When he said he was taking pre-orders, like I got in touch and said, like, put me on the list, like, you know, in line with everybody else, because I would love to have one. But it is actually, it's not a laser engraving solution. It's the exact same thing you're doing manually with the seed plates. It's just like a percussive tool that punches the metal at, you know, an extremely high frequency. But yeah, I'm still very curious about that too. I think it's going to be an awesome cold storage option when it releases.
And then also too, if anybody, it might seem like a little, if you're not familiar with like watch only, it's obviously only send only. You can only send your coins or sats to it. You can't move it unless you have do a PSBT with your actual device. But what I wanted to say, it's even BTC Sessions. He does a great walkthrough from the whole build. If you just want to do it at your own leisure, he walks you all the way through from the build, then actually how to sign a transaction from everything. So there's simplified resources. And like I said, I followed the video, I watched it, and like I said, I did it with like 3 drinks, and I'm not much of a drinker like that. So if I can do it, I'm sure that the next person can. So if anybody doesn't have any more questions, like I said, I appreciate you taking your time. And like I said, I'll work on the back channels on trying to get you out here, because I think it'd be great to have you actually come out here and do it in person with us. And I think it'd be awesome to see if we can either do. I know you said you'll be getting a shipment here in December. Maybe we can get some for those who are interested. Do some pre-orders with you, so we can get it. We can kind of build it out here, and then they can kind of work through a P2P with you in regards to those parts. So like I said, I'm interested, and like I said, I'd like to build some more and actually get my brother, get him lazy off the the ledger. So it's I think it's a great product. I love it. So like I said, I appreciate you taking your time out here, and like I said, we'll work on getting you out here, buddy.
Yeah, no, I'd love that. We'll have to keep in touch as time goes on.
Yep. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank everybody for coming out. So thank you guys. Wish you guys the best. You guys have a good one, and I'll see you here in a few weeks.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.
See you
Take
guys.
care.
Thanks.